Now, obviously today we're talking about Amor Fati, this Stoic idea of loving your fate. And I've been really thinking about that for the past few days. Actually, for the past few months, I've been really wrestling with this idea and trying to figure out exactly how deep I can go into it. Because I don't think that it does it justice to just say, well, it's one of the tools and tactics of Stoicism, and so yeah, love your fate. Now go and do it, right? It just doesn't. It doesn't do the principle justice to just look at it as a tool or a tactic that you can just immediately start using. Because although that is kind of the case, lately I've been really starting to understand that unless you fully understand the absolute core of what an idea is and why it's going to be useful to you, you're not going to use it in your life, and you're not going to get the results. And so really when it comes to these ideas that we're discussing in Stoicism, you have to have that core understanding of exactly why you would do the thing. And then once you understand that, then it becomes clear to you why you would do it. And then you will just naturally, embody that principle. And it's kind of like, with virtue. So like in Stoicism, there's kind of a hierarchy, right? It's like we want to be in alignment with nature or live in agreement with nature. But that's not necessarily the goal. Sorry, let me rephrase this. We want to have eudaimonia, which is like the flourishing life. That's like what we want. However, that's not the goal. That's the result. It's the result of living a life in agreement with nature, right? So we don't aim at flourishing. We actually aim at living in agreement with nature, and we aim at other principles, which then present to us, beautiful results in our life. And so when it comes to Amor Fati, this is a principle that you have to understand a few core things first, and then it will naturally make sense to you that will be a result in your life. And, we've been talking about gratitude. We've been talking about all sorts of beautiful things to do with like changing your mindset around the way you see life. And when I was thinking about this sort of thing, I know we discussed this a little bit last week, but I've actually been thinking back to my time when I was going to church as a Mormon when I was growing up. And one of the ideas that they would always teach us is, and people would talk about this ad nauseum, they would just go on for hours, this idea that God has a plan, right? And the plan is whatever it is, and you don't decide that, but he does. And so if something happens to you in your life that you don't particularly like, don't worry about it. Just look for the opportunity to use God's plan, right, to better your life. Now, it could be something that you perceive to be bad that happens to you. It could be, they often called it like a trial, right? So we have trials in our life, things that we don't particularly like, things that, we could be seen to be harmful to us. But when those things happen, the best thing that you can do is say, you know what? It's God's plan. So whatever it is, I'm just going to use it to the best of my abilities to make myself a better person and to strengthen myself. It's an opportunity to become stronger and better as a human being. Now, this is an idea that really kind of transcends the religious realm, right? Like you don't have to believe in a specific God, or you don't have to believe in Muhammad. You don't have to believe in anything other than the universal nature, which is, undeniable, right? You don't have to attach your exercise to a specific belief in a God. You can just say, well, everything around me seems to work, whether I agree with it or not. Everything just seems to happen, whether I approve of it or not. So why don't I get into the mindset of whatever happens, I'm going to use it to my advantage because it is happening by reason of the natural order of how things happen. And so that's why when I started thinking about that, I was kind of like, man, like Stoicism has almost used logic to get us to see how reasonable and rational it is to view the universe as a working whole, as everything is just going and just happening. And one thing that I was thinking about earlier was, so this sunrise in the background, right? I love going to the beach. I love sitting there, just watching the sun come up. And I don't think that there's a better example of universal nature than just sitting there and watching the sun rise, right? Because this is such a perfect representation of how everything just happens, right? You don't make the sun come up. You don't make the waves flow in. You don't make the cloud formations, which create this exquisite piece of art behind me. All of this is happening with or without your approval, with or without your love and your care and your attention, right? It's just happening. And then, you look at the sun and then it hits your face. And when the sun hits your face, it's literally just injecting you with these ultraviolet rays that then interact with your body and create vitamin B. And then that vitamin B just naturally helps your body to function better, and it helps you to feel better, and you feel the warmth on your face. And all of this stuff is happening whether you like it or not, whether you want it or not, right? And you can't stop it, and you can't necessarily make it change. It just is happening. So this is what I really think that we need to understand before we can actually start implementing this idea of Amor Fati in our life. It's that whatever is happening outside of you, it's going to happen, right? So you can do one of two things. You can either welcome what happens outside of you because you know that it's going to happen whether you like it or not, or you can kick against it and you can be mad that it's happening, or you can wish that it was another way. And logically, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And we know that it doesn't make sense because every time we try to push against what happens to us, we don't feel great about that. And one thing that I wanted to discuss here is, I think I've been thinking about this lately. I really think that we have gone down a path as humanity where we've completely misunderstood what we are fundamentally as human beings, right? So at the moment you walk around and what you perceive is that you are basically a screen, right? And there's projectors out in front of you, and those projectors are projecting onto you, and you are feeling what those projectors are projecting onto you, right? So you go throughout your life and somebody says something rude to you, right? And you feel as though you are the screen and they are the projector, and therefore what you feel is what they have projected onto you. And then, you go to work and you've got annoying colleagues and they're just projecting all of this crap on top of you, and everything is projecting crap on top of you, right? And you just become this picture of everything that you don't like about the world. And when things are good, then you feel good. And when things are bad, you feel bad. And so we're walking around in actually the complete opposite manner to what we actually are as human beings, right? Because what we actually are as human beings is we are the projectors, right? So, and we know this because you go to a movie and you watch this movie and you go with your friend, say. When you leave, your friend will have a completely different opinion about what happened in that movie and about whether they liked that movie or not. And you'll discuss it, and it'll be an interesting conversation, right? Now, what is that? Because if the world was projecting on you, then you would both have the same picture because the world was presenting on you. But that's not the world that we live in, right? We live in a world where you watch the movie and one projector is projecting something on a screen, but then you are also projecting everything that you have known in your life, all of your experiences, all of your perceptions about what happens, right? And you project that onto the screen, and that's what you see. So this is a fundamental understanding that we need to know in order to fully accept and fully utilize the principle of Amor Fati. Right? Because if you go throughout your life and all that you're projecting is, I'm happy when things are good and I'm unhappy when things are bad, then that's exactly what the screen of your life, right, is always going to show you. But if you go through life saying, whatever I project is going to be good, it's going to be virtuous, it's going to be, I'm going to project love and care and attention and I'm going to project only goodness from myself, right? That's when you start to actually see good things projected out in front of you, right? But it cannot happen unless you understand that fundamentally as a human being, you are the projector, right? So I think that that's really important. And once you understand that, man, you'll start to see different things. And that's why when I said that we need to do this gratitude exercise a few weeks ago of like, hey, write down every single week, what are the beautiful things that you see in your life? What are the beautiful things that you're grateful for? As soon as you start that as an exercise, after a few days, you'll start to see more beautiful things because you're programming your projector to project good things in front of you, right? And this can sound like I'm preaching The Secret or some sort of success doctrine. That's just not it. Because we also need to understand what Amor Fati means. It doesn't mean that you'll always get what you want. It doesn't mean that things will always go exactly how you would like them to go. That's not what it is. What it is that no matter what happens, you can choose to project goodness out on what that is. So things will happen in your life that are ugly. Things will happen in your life that you don't particularly agree with or want to happen. But you can project onto them goodness and virtue, right? And when you do that, you're literally creating the scene in front of you. A perfect example of this is, let's say, your significant other comes in and all of a sudden they're projecting from their projector some sort of argument, or, like there's some sort of, strife between you two, right? What do you think is going to be the absolute best response to that? What do you think you can project onto them that would help that situation? Because if you believe that you are the receiver and not the projector, then you're going to see what they're projecting on you and you're going to be like, well, that's ugly, so I'm going to give some ugliness back, right? And we know that that does not work, right? But if you were to project on them, right, goodness, kindness, understanding, all of these things that I still don't know how to give, like if you're able to project all of this stuff on them, that's literally the best case scenario for making that situation better for everybody, right? So I just think it's really important that we understand that. You're the projector. So Amor Fati means project goodness out, right? I love whatever happens to me. And when you project, I love whatever happens to me out, you will find more things to love, right? Even in situations that are seemingly dire, right? You will find opportunities to be more generous, opportunities to be more grateful, all of these good things. So just want to make sure that I'm getting everything here. Yeah. Okay. One thing that I just wanted to mention as well is going back to that analogy of the sun, and how it kind of like naturally just nourishes us, right? One thing that I think is just so important to recognize is that you are constantly, all the time, being nourished into being, right? And we know this because if you stop eating, then you start to, after a long time, you'll start to fade away, right? If you stop drinking water, you'll start to fade away. Maybe if you don't have necessarily a healthy relationship in your life, there will be a part of you that starts to fade away. Like there are these things that we naturally as human beings want in our lives that nourish us into being. When you understand that all of that is just happening no matter what, like I think that's the most important thing that you can recognize, because then it gives you the opportunity to give back what you have received, right? And that's why I think that the word of love your fate is actually really important here. It's like, you don't have to necessarily like everything that happens to you, but if you love, if you actually genuinely love what happens to you, then you are loving other things into being almost. It's kind of like, man, it sounds so cheesy and it sounds so woo-woo, but man, what better way is there to live life? Like, what do you do with a kid? Eric, you know this. You love them into being. You as a father, like, you try as much as you possibly can to project love and care and attention to your children. And as you do that, they grow up into better whole human beings, right? Now, I just wanted to share one quick story before we jump into a bit of discussion, because I think that Stoicism can really take a lot from Eastern philosophy in terms of the principles that they taught, because I think that it actually fills a lot of gaps in Stoicism. But I heard this great story the other day that I have to share with you guys, because when you hear this story, then it'll give you something that you can attach your mind to, that'll show you that you can use Amor Fati in your life. But Alan Watts told this story. He told the story of a Zen Buddhist monk. So this Zen Buddhist, he was very famous, and he was very well known, very basically very enlightened, right? And he was having dinner with a few friends, and throughout the dinner, he noticed that the waitress was extremely, she was perfected in everything that she was doing. She was perfectly dressed. She would bring out the food perfectly ordered, place it down perfectly. She was always very courteous, very kind. And he basically thought, interesting, maybe she is also trained in the art of Zen Buddhism, right? So when she came out at the end, he thanked her for the meals and taking care of them and everything. And he kind of said to her, I have a gift for you. May I give you a gift? And she said, yes, master, you may give me a gift. So he took a coal from the little fire keeping the food hot in the middle. He took a little coal, right, and placed it in her hands, right? And this thing is obviously scorching hot, right? So she immediately takes her kimono, grabs the coal in the material, takes it out the back, puts it away, changes her kimono because it was burnt, and now she needs to get into a clean one again. And then she comes back. She didn't flinch. She didn't go crazy. She didn't think that it was rude, anything like that. She was just grateful for the gift that the master had given her, right? And then she says, master, now may I give you a gift? And he says, of course you can. So she also takes a coal and hands it to him, but he doesn't take it. He gets out a cigarette and says, thank you, that's exactly what I needed. And he uses the coal to light his cigarette. And that's like a perfect representation, right, of this idea that, like, man, sometimes things are handed to you in life, right? And you have a few different ways of looking at how they could be good for you. The Zen Buddhist master said, that is good for me. And then he sat back and smoked, So it's like, look at what's happening in your life, right? And look for the opportunities and love what happens to you, because loving what happens to you is the best possible way for you to actually project out and see good opportunities for you. So that's pretty much the only stuff that I really wanted to share in today's session. I want to jump into a bit of a discussion. Actually, before I do, one thing that I did want to mention is, has anybody seen that episode of Seinfeld where George Costanza's dad has that line, "Serenity now"? Has anybody heard that?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So this is the opposite of Amor Fati. This is the psychopathic Amor Fati, right? That's why I wanted to have this discussion around understanding why we would actually understand this principle. Because in that episode, basically George Costanza's dad, he was always stressed, and he's this angry guy, right? And so his therapist told him that every time something bad happens to you, you should say, serenity now, serenity now, serenity now, right? But unless you actually understand why you should have serenity now, unless you actually understand why you would want good things to happen to you, it's just insanity. It's like Jim Rohn said, right? Like, if you motivate an idiot, you've just got a motivated idiot, right? So Amor Fati is not just about going around saying serenity now, because at the end of the episode, he goes absolutely insane. And that's what you will do if all that you ever do is just say serenity now, serenity. I love my fate. I love my fate. Understand why you should love your fate. Understand why it would be good for you. Then things will make sense. And then you'll actually start to see good things. So sorry for all the rambling, but I hope that you took a few little pieces out of there. I hope there were a few coals that could light your cigarette amongst all of that. And now I'm really keen to jump into a bit of a conversation with you guys around times when you have projected goodness, or when you have seen good things come out of potentially dire situations. So maybe if you're keen to jump in and have your say, there should be a little oh yeah, you can put your hands up, or you can put a thumbs up or something like that. So go for it. Anyone want to jump in?
Yeah.
Awesome. Eric, welcome.
Yeah, cheers. what you said about fatherhood, when you kind of ask about, if I'm considering, uh, I'm talking now about Amor Fati, on my vision of it. Amor Fati has this idea. It starts with the word amor, and that's really the idea of falling in love. And in the very romantic European vision of what love is, there's the idea that when you fall in love, or in English you call it infatuated, but it's good food or whatever. What happens is anything that happened and brought you randomly with that person with who you are falling in love with, you don't care. You don't care about the past, or actually you're happy because it brought you to meet the past of this person with kind of these things. When you're completely crazy and unbalanced, you will think that it's actually kind of fulfill your destiny and everything. Now, as a parent, there's definitely something that when your child is born, or the child that you had in front of you, you will not change anything, because in the kind of all the things that happen in your life or all the universe, something would have happened. You would have made love at another time, or in the case of a stepdaughter, someone else would have been the partner, whatever, would not have brought this particular being in front of you. And you love that being as a child, whatever. So anything that happened before that, kind of things. And if you have a life relatively well lived, or if you rebound on something, you realize, and I think it's because we are story maker. Basically, Amor Fati is not really, it has to be all the time. It's just like some of these trials that you have around the place, you will actually enjoy it, because that's what actually makes you strong. That's actually that in your story, that's the thing that in the hero's journey, that's basically what will change you, what will make you. So there can be very difficult times, there can be things like that, but yes, I love it. You might kind of convince yourself about that, in the same way that when you're running a marathon, it's like you basically kind of go on a runner high, and at the same time you're just like, what did I decide to do that? And the first time that was crazy, but you kind of, this will be part of the story. And Amor Fati for me is like, no, you cannot have to say serenity now at every time. Amor Fati is not that the moment will be happy, it's that this moment will bring you happiness, and therefore you're ready for it in a certain way. That's my perception of it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And yeah, Bob, I want to bring you in, but just that idea as well of like falling in love. It's so true. Hey, like if you look back at your life and you think of all of the different things that have led you to be where you are now, like your only option is to love that, because where else can you be? You can't be anywhere else other than where you are now, right? And so if you look back at your what happened to you and you think, well, that sucks, or I don't like that, or I wish it had have gone differently. Well, you can't wish it had have gone differently, because it didn't go differently. And you are what you are right now. And this is what you have. And man, once you understand that the universe is just making you whatever you are all the time, constantly, and that will always happen, then you can kind of just let go, right? You can just ride that wave and say, cool, okay, well, if the universe is always just making me what I am and just nourishing me into being, whether I like it or not, like, it's okay, I have to just resign to that. I just have to let it happen. I think that's beautiful. But Bob, I want to bring you in as well.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of piggyback on what you and Eric were saying, is that in Amor Fati, what I think about it is I kind of use the view from above when going through difficult situations, and even situations that are seen as good, like falling in love with someone, as Eric said. I think that just kind of looking at those events and seeing that they're ephemeral and they're very temporary a lot of times, not a lot of stuff is lasting. I think Epictetus says a lot of stuff about that, and Marcus Aurelius, about the sort of ephemeral nature of our experiences. And I like to use the view from above, just because when I'm going through even the most difficult times, like even now with the virus, it's kind of hard at first when all this started coming out, for me to think, oh, there will be good that comes from this that I can learn from. But really, when I reflected and I journaled and I meditated on it, I really can see how this whole experience can really, just the acceptance of it can really bring out a lot of benefits to not just me, but a lot of people in society. And there's this thing that I like to remind myself, even when I'm going through these problematic times with fate, is in my classroom, I have this thing by my desk, and it's this huge picture of the universe, of the Milky Way galaxy. And there's like a little dot that says, "You are here." And it just kind of lets us know how ridiculous our little squabbles are in each and every day and all of our interactions.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I have to say about it.
Yeah. No, that's so beautiful, man. And that idea of, man, I've got to read you this actually, Marcus Aurelius, since you talked about the view from above and seeing as he, listen to this and tell me that these aren't the words of somebody who is at perfect unity with everything that's happening around him, right? He says, "To the world, your harmony is mine. Whatever time you choose is the right time. Not late, not early. To nature, what the turn of your seasons brings me falls like ripe fruit. All things are born from you, exist in you, return to you." So, man, like that, those are the words of somebody who gets it, right? And I'm serious about this. Whether you call it God, whether you call it Muhammad, whether you call it universal nature, whether you call it whatever you want to call it, it's just your way of getting in touch with the fact that all of this is happening, and it will happen. And we don't even necessarily need to say that there's a plan. That there might be absolutely no plan. The Stoics kind of wrestled with this idea: do the gods care about us? Do they not? Do they want what's best for us? Do they not really care at all? It just doesn't matter. Like it's about accepting that what happens can be good for us if we align with that. Something that I've also been kind of thinking about has been this idea that maybe that's something for another time, actually, because it can go down a massive rabbit hole. Yeah, that's going to be for another time. That'll be like a half-hour conversation. But did anybody else want to jump in with an experience in their life or how they kind of use this principle?
I'll come on if.
Yeah.
I think it's the most, when it comes to that love of faith, the most important thing is acceptance, and it's acceptance of the whole. I mean, I've fallen into the trap of trying to use it to kind of rationalize a bad situation of like, oh, got to see the positive, and then it kind of becomes the tyranny of positive thinking, and I sort of remember one day, I went to work and I forgot to pack my lunch, and I had to drive home on my lunch break, and I remember love of fate, and then it's been there's actually nothing good about this.
Serenity now.
Yeah. I read the obstacle is the way, and I had this thing of there's good in every situation. You just got to find it, and sometimes there isn't. Sometimes there is nothing desirable about something, and that's okay. You got to have that acceptance that because the love of fate is the love of the whole. It's important to be able to have acceptance when things aren't great, and it might seem like it sucks, and oh well, that's okay. Just as you're saying before, the view from above, just keep your eye on the bigger picture, and this is okay. It's just fleeting. There's a couple of weeks back with the gratitude one, you had a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson or something about how did that one go?
I actually cannot remember that at all. I'm not going to be able to recall that, but it was a good quote. It was something about how everything, just if you're grateful for things. I can't remember. Have to find
it. Was how everything made you. Everything made you. It wasn't just the good times kind of thing. Kind of it's like the symphony kind of thing. But anyway, I would that story made me think of the story of the Chinese farmer. Have you heard that one?
Yeah. But tell it.
No.
Give us the Ashley version.
The Ashley version. All right. So, old mate farmer one day, and his horse runs away. So all his
That's
mates
the most
come
Australian start to any story that you guys will ever hear, by the way. That's the best. Old mate bloody farmer over here with his bloody chickens and stuff, you know.
around. He's just hanging around and hanging out, and his horse runs away. And then, so all the mates come around from the village, and they say, "Oh, your horse ran away. That's too bad, mate. That's bad luck." And he says, "Maybe." And then the next day, the horse comes back, and it brings 7 other wild horses, and they all say, "Oh, old mate, this is great. Good news, hey? Isn't that good fortune?" And he says, "Maybe." And then the next day, his son's trying to break in one of the new horses, and he falls off and smashes his leg. And they say, "Oh, your son broke his leg. Oh, that's unfortunate, isn't it?" And he says, "Maybe." And then the next day, the conscription officers come, and they reject his son. Nah, he's a cripple, no good. And everyone says, "Oh, isn't that great? Oh, that's so wonderful. You must be so happy." "Oh, maybe."
And that's it. It's such a good, man. When I heard that a few years ago, that just blew my mind, because it's such a great representation of what we're supposed to. And I think that we can probably have a little bit more joy in our life than just to sit there and just say maybe to everything. However, it's the idea behind that story, right? It's the idea that
it's the indifference. Like it's total difference, because when you're just living in the moment, you just don't have all those judgments about, well, this means and that's good, this is bad. It's just, okay, that's just how it is. Like, I mean, that's what it means to me anyway, about what it means to be in the moment. And it's like that, it's sort of that postponement, because it's like, is this good, is this bad? I don't know, I'll just wait and find out. I don't need to decide now, get caught up, oh, it's bad, this is good. It's just, well, I don't know, whatever comes.
I think something that's really important about what you're saying, it's actually making me think of this idea that this game of Amor Fati, it's a game that you can't necessarily play half-heartedly. It's like there are a few games in life that you can only play by going all in, right? And with Amor Fati, you have to be all in on the idea that you need to project some goodness out into the world, right? You need to be the one to say, whatever happens could be good for me if I'm willing to actually see the thing, right? Because isn't it the most egotistical way to live your life to only be happy when good things happen, only be sad when sad things happen or bad things happen, and just to be constantly on this? It's like you're projecting into the world that I'm gonna accept you when you make me happy, and I'm not gonna accept you when you make me sad, right? And that's the ego telling us that all of this is happening just for us. Oh, get it all in me, you know, like, oh, I don't want that, I want that. It's like it's such a deprived way of living your life, right? But if you choose to not let your ego make you think that all of this is just gonna, it's either gonna make you happy or sad. Like if you choose that you can focus inwardly, get rid of that ego and say, you know what, no matter what happens, we'll see. Like, hey, like it could be good for me, it could be bad for me, but ultimately I'll make the most of it. I really think that's it's something that you need to, it's not something that happens external to you. It always has to come straight back to that one tiny little thing that you can control, which is your own virtue, your own virtuous action in this world. And if you can control that, that's when good things start to happen. I've been thinking about this lately. Like virtue is just one of those things that you cannot break, because think of any time in your life that would not be benefited by you adding a little bit more virtue and a little bit more attention to that one thing that is in your mind. It's like that little thing that projects larger, right? If you change your virtue just one tiny little degree, right? It's like, look at when that projects out into the world, look at all the goodness that comes to you as a result of you changing that one little thing in your ability to process the world. So you have to always come back to that reasoning capacity, that virtuous capacity to think within your own mind and project that outwards. Did anybody else have anything that they wanted to jump in with in terms of?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Jacek? Yep.
Right. Thank you. Now, I've got several things going on, and let's see if I can put them into a coherent whole.
Awesome.
Please forgive me if I don't make sense. It's late here. Right. First of all, let me start by saying that I think it was my first meetup when you introduced this idea of loving your faith, and then my first question was, yes, but how? How do I do it? How do I do it? And then in that conversation, gratitude was mentioned, and was like, oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, like a gratitude journal, I could work towards that. And what I found really interesting was that, now I have to admit, last week my journaling was non-existent. Hopefully I will begin again today. But what I noticed was that after several days, I was genuinely, it wasn't like I was brainwashing, like trying to convince myself into thinking something, but I was genuinely appreciating that I was struggling with quitting coffee. It was really interesting that I was able to see this challenge as an opportunity for myself. So that showed me that this really actually works. However, I still think that I am in the very early days of my practice of gratitude, but still it was quite tangible outcome. And you often say, I've been thinking a lot about this recently, and today it started to dawn on me that perhaps I don't spend enough time really deeply reflecting on certain issues, but I mean really deeply. So like I'm just asking myself, am I not just touching on those issues too shallowly? I remember some time ago I wanted to quit cigarettes, and any method of using willpower was just total failure. And then I've read this book, I forgot the author, but that book changed my thinking. That book really unpacked how I think about it. And after that, quitting cigarettes was like, boom, no problem at all. So that also showed me that the power of really thinking deeply about it. So I have a feeling today, this conversation about loving my faith, I realized that I haven't really thought deeply enough about it. And I think I will aim to do that, maybe sit down and really think it through more deeply. And the idea that started to emerge from this meeting, there's often this expression like create your own life. I always thought it's a bullshit. I don't like this kind of language. But maybe there is actually the way of creating my life by changing how I see, how I decide, how I choose to perceive my life. I always thought that I have been dealt a shitty hand in my life, but actually, this gives me hope that I could really maybe change the way I perceive it. But I can feel very, very clearly that I won't be able to make it by myself. I need the wisdom. I need the wisdom of all those people who came before us, and I need the wisdom of a fellow, people on the path. That's very clear for me. That's clear for me. I'm just looking if there's anything else here. I've been jotting down thoughts that I wanted to express. I really do hope it makes kind of sense. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think it's
Yeah.
from me. Thank you. Yes.
No, it does make sense. And I want to thank you for sharing that, because that's such an important point. This idea of we need to go within ourselves a little bit more. Stoicism isn't just a platter of tools and tactics that you can just be, oh, cool, I'll take that and I'll take that. You have to actually understand why they're going to be helpful for you. And something that I've been considering is there seems to be a theme running through the Stoics literature. And the theme is throw away your books, right? So Marcus Aurelius has these beautiful quotes where he's like, man, when are you going to understand what world you live in? Throw away the books, get rid of the influences, right? Because I was talking to my wife last night, from the youngest age. So as soon as we're born, people are there's like a massive pile of everything that people think they know in terms of how to live life. And they're just shoveling that on top of you. Oh, you should do this. You should do that. This is the correct way to think. That's the correct way to think. So we don't even know anymore how to naturally tap into our own human individual ability to rationalize, to reason, to think, to understand the world around us. Because from such a young age, we didn't have to think because people told us how to think, right? And that's just a natural part of being a human, because everybody wants the best for you. And because of our egos, we think that what is best for us, or at least we think that we have what's best for us, which we don't, but we think that we should put that on other people. When you look at the world today, most people are aiming at things that are fake. They're aiming at false targets, right? And so you might say that, well, if I employ a little bit of anger, if I employ a little bit of hard discipline and hard talk to myself, this is going to get me far in life. And it might get you far in life, but it's going to get you far in life at a game that is not worth playing, right? But if you play the game of virtue, which is a game that you can always win, and it's a game that you will always be nourished by, no matter what happens in your life, then that's a game worth playing. And that's a game that you have to be all in on, right? And the reason why Amor Fati is so powerful is because as Stoics, that is our aim. Our aim is a flourishing life, but before that, our aim has to be at virtue, right? And think about this. The Stoics' life is not always going to reflect the generalized idea of success in society, right? So we need to understand that if I'm aiming at virtue, I might not impress my work colleagues to the point where I get all of the promotions. I might not impress people in my life enough that they're going to give me exactly what is the standard idea of success. But I'm going to be projecting out goodness that will come back to me in the form of a life that gives me flourishing inwardly. I'm going to be having a life that no matter what happens, I will feel nourished and I will feel connected to the natural order of how things happen. That's a beautiful thing to aim at, and that's a game that you can win, right? So that's why Amor Fati is so important, because Amor Fati is that principle that comes in when you're being virtuous and you're trying your best, but things just aren't going how you think that they should go. And Amor Fati reminds you, that's not the game you're playing. Stick to the game that you should be playing, which is focusing on real things, focusing on what's good, focusing on what's virtuous, focusing on being the best that you can be. And man, like, it's so powerful when you understand that you can start to think about these principles and you can actually understand them by simply just being with yourself. You don't need to fill yourself with all the books. You don't. I struggle to say that because I'm sitting in front of all of these beautiful books, which I have loved and have nourished my soul, right? Like, it's so hard to say that, but there has to be a balance. There has to be a balance of getting the information, but then shoving it aside and saying, I just need to be, and I need to listen, and I need to pay attention, and I need to sit here and be happy sitting here and receiving what I learn, Does anybody else want to jump in with anything? I know, Eric, you had something that you wanted to, and then we'll go down to Jeff.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
I just want to, what you just said about Amor Fati not being something for faint-hearted hearts, that you had to go completely at it. It kind of opens the possibility that Amor Fati is just a result to be present, to be focused about what you're doing on. And if you apply the dichotomy of things you can change, then it's like a game. It's like, okay, then if I can change something, then it's up to me to adapt. And if it was a video game and the bad guy were shooting at me or something like that, it would be actually entertaining. If it happens in real life, it's a bit less, but it's still kind of this idea that you can do something. If it's something you can't do anything, an earthquake or something like that, is it just an event, or like at any level? And I think for a parent, one of the worst things that you could imagine. I mean, if something was happening to my children, the concept of Amor Fati will definitely be the last things on my mind. But it is kind of, there's still something that it builds on in a certain way, or that a life well spent or spent, something will happen out of it. If, as you kind of said at the beginning, from the way you project. But as this idea really from what you're saying is that if you're truly into flow, if you're truly too present, you can use the Zen, you can do whatever, you're truly, it's the way to achieve Amor Fati is really to be at the moment in a certain way. And any sufferings that you're getting is because you're having regrets or because you have anxiety, so you're actually not present in either of these things. That might be, that's one of the things I will consider to explore in my thinking about Amor Fati.
It's kind of like this idea of you're centered within the universe, right? Like there is no in front of you, there is no behind you, there is just what you are and what you have, right?
Yes, there's this idea that true happiness is when you're in flow and you actually kind of lose yourself in a certain way. You are doing an activity very well. So it might not be doing the dishes, it can be like painting or whatever, but actually if you're able to do that, doing the dishes or whatever you need to do, if you are really having the serious engagement that you will do as if you were building a cathedral, maybe your life would be kind of better. I mean, that's really, really idealistic. And it's something that I don't imagine how I will do that in my day-by-day life. But still, it's the idea of total engagement with the present of what it's at end, to the point you kind of lose your ego in it because you're in it. I don't know. It's just so
well, I think a good way to break it down is think of any situation in your life that wouldn't be made better by you having a cheerful outlook on the fact that you're going through that. And okay, I can already think of a time you don't want to turn up to a funeral all cheery faced, right? you don't want to you don't want to just
people don't really really like that. I don't know why.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like he's going to a better place. I can see how I don't understand how people don't.
But see, if you think about the dishes, it's like, okay, is my life going to be benefited by being cheerfully hearted, right, towards doing the dishes? Absolutely. Like, you show up and you project a attitude of, this is just what's happening, and so I can either show up in a cheerful way or I can show up kicking against it. Like, you probably deal with this with your kids all the time, right? Like, when you ask them to do the dishes and then all of a sudden, you get a whole bunch of slack from them.
We do have dishwasher in England,
Why do we have a dishwasher? Because there's something wrong with doing the dishes, right? Man, it's so beautiful to sit there and just wash the dishes, and get the sponge out and, spend a bit of time just being there with the dishes, No, but that's, Jeff, I want to bring you in as well.
Sure.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, thanks. So, a little bit following on to what Eric was just talking about and how you finished up, Simon, talking about the books. And so right at the very end, you just really you said it's a state of being or a way of being, right? So the books, to me, right, it's about the wisdom and the knowledge you gain from it. But Amor Fati it's a way of being, right? We want to be virtuous. So as you were going on, we're looking at the books, we're learning from it, but Amor Fati and being virtuous, it's a way of being, right? So I'm trying to find that way to separate throwing away the books, which I get because that's more about wisdom, knowledge, and learning, versus a way of being. And you know, you said it right at the end there, and to me, I thought that summed it up very well. And in the present moment, when Eric was talking about that too, it's that whole present moment, and we're at choice, and we get to determine how we want to act and how we want to be in that moment. And you know, the challenge I've had too with I've kind of grown to the point, I'll say, in the last several years, where I'm accepting a lot more in my life, but I'm not loving it. Right? Sometimes I am, and to me, that's what I'm working on. Really, more loving what happens, and not just accepting it. So there's a difference, and I felt that difference much stronger just listening to the conversation today. So things to work on.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah. Sorry.
Thanks.
Ashley, you were just going to jump in?
I was going to say, I think, hit some real good points there. And I think maybe we're going to have to make this our challenge for the week, is to, as you were saying before, just to show up with that cheerful disposition and just say, yep, I'm doing this. Let's do it. I'm going to smash these dishes. Let's wash them up. Yeah. And just try and bring that cheerfulness, as you call it, to every situation that you're in, even if you don't want to be there, to just like accept and be glad to say, yep, this is what I got to do. Like, to make that a challenge for the week, to start putting your attention onto that every time you're going, oh, to go, oh, wait.
Because who told any of us that it was a bad thing to do the dishes?
Yeah.
Like, who told any of us that there were good and bad things in the world? Like, think back to, as if we can imagine that. Maybe we can with psychedelics and everything that's happening there. Who knows? But like, think back to like when we were like, hunters and gatherers, right? It's like you're just walking through the world. You're like an ape, right? Like an ape is going through the world and isn't necessarily perplexed about anything. Nothing is necessarily good or bad. There is just the senses, and they're just automatically happening, right? But the best thing that ever happened to humans, and the worst thing that ever happened to humans, is that we started to believe that we had some sort of knowledge, right? about what is good and what is bad. And so when we started doing that, we started believing ourselves. And then all of a sudden, we're here today where we've created so many problems for ourselves because we think that there are so many bad things. And therefore we've had to create so many solutions for things because there are so many bad things that needed to be solved. So, hey, you've got to have a dishwasher. You've got to have that fancy car. You've got to have that beautiful home, that hot wife. You've got to have all of this because you've got so many problems that are bad in your life that you need fixed, right? And when you think about it like that, it's like, oh my gosh, like, what if everything was just there and my job was simply to navigate this landscape, just being there? Dishes wouldn't necessarily bad. They wouldn't be good. And I want to bring you in, Scott, as well, because you can probably add to this conversation that we're having now. Oh, can't hear you yet. Oh no, we've lost him. There we go. Scott, come back. Wait, we had you for a second. Unmute. There we go. Everybody, this is neither good nor bad. This is simply the process of nature.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Okay, sorry. So I was just going to say, to me, Amor Fati is just a reminder that life doesn't happen to you. Life doesn't happen for you. Life just happens. We have the choice of how we're going to show up. That goes back to the dichotomy of control. Are we going to contribute something positively or contribute something negatively? Because regardless what we're going to do, life's still going to happen. Last week, I wasn't able to make the meetup. It still went on without me. You guys had a great discussion. I just wasn't able to participate because I chose not to. And with life, It's going to happen regardless, as many people have mentioned today. But we have to just recognize that we are not the center of the world. There's a condition called Solecism, where people are convinced that everything happens because of them, that nothing is real outside of them. And whenever we are mistaken, when we get confused, we get distracted by life and think that things should happen because it's me. Something good has to happen. That's a mistake in thinking. It's a fault in our logic. But we just need to embrace Amor Fati. It's not pleasant, but it's really the only rational way to approach life.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's it. It is the most rational way to approach life, and you can only really understand that once you apply the principle, right? That you can really only understand that when you start playing the game that we're playing here. And I was thinking about that idea of how you show up is the perfect way to put it. You know, and I was thinking about this the other day. I was climbing a mountain, getting some exercise in, and something that's just been on my mind lately has been nature, culture, and philosophy. These to me seem to be the core fundamental aspects of humanity that we kind of need to understand. Nature, we need to learn to accept it, and we need to learn what it is, because we are nature. Everything outside of us is nature. We need to understand the world that we live in, right? So the mountain is kind of like nature. That's all of the ingredients. And you're standing here looking at this mountain, you're like, cool, that's what it is. Culture is the thing that creates the path to the top of the mountain, right? So culture is kind of like, they've given you these set of guidelines, right? And, you can kick against culture, but you might not necessarily have the best time. But you can also go right into culture, and you can just be completely lied to your whole life about what's good and what's bad. But then philosophy is everything that you pack in your backpack to climb that mountain. Philosophy is how skilled you are at going off the path and navigating effectively against, going a better way up the mountain. Philosophy is who you take with you, on your climb. Philosophy is all of your input, right, to how we face this whole situation of nature and culture together. And Amor Fati is one of those ideas that you chuck in your backpack, because you understand what I'm seeing here is a mountain to climb, and I can choose how fast I climb it. I can choose how much I appreciate the mountain. I can choose whether I stop from time to time to view what's out there on the world. It's like, it's such a beautiful way to ride this journey of life, as cheesy as that sounds, because we're all on some sort of path. And this is just the way that you view that path, and the way that you view the destination, and the way that you view right below your feet and right above you and everything. It's just like, it's such a beautiful way to be. And did anybody else want to jump in before we jump into the challenge and everything? Excellent. All right. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming today. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate all of your input. Seriously, it's, as much as I'm grateful for the opportunity to put down my thoughts and express them to you guys, the fact that you all then jump in and discuss that with me only serves to, it's like Jim Rohn said, if you have an idea, you want to share that idea, because if you share that with 10 people, then you've heard that idea 10 times, right? And so you get so much more out of it. And that's the idea of this group, is just getting together and sharing. And it just forces us to think, like Yesek said, we need to be exploring these ideas to the best of our abilities. Now, did anybody, so we've already kind of gone through that. Ashley, you've got the challenge for this week, which is going to be, remind us of that again. We're going to be thinking about showing up in a cheerful way.
Yep. Whatever it is, showing up in a cheerful way and being glad to do it. Yeah, glad to do it. That's especially
a good way.
Things that you don't want to do. That's when it's hard, I think. Yeah.
And question it. Is this really bad? Like, is that, like, as soon as that feeling comes up in your body and you feel, like that aversion, right? Just question it. why do I think this is bad? Is it really bad? If it is bad, what is it about it that makes it bad? You know, like, just start to think about those kinds of questions, and the answers will come.
And where is that come from? Is that bad because it was bad in the past? Am I stuck in the past? Am I projecting into the future? Like, yeah.
And that's why I say culture, right? Culture is that thing that creates the path for you. Culture is the reason why, you think that something is good or bad. So as a philosopher, you have to get really skilled at breaking the rules effectively, right? And that's one way of breaking the rules. It's like the rule is set. Doing the dishes is bad. We know that it's a rule because we have dishwashers and we have all of these things, all of these amazing appliances that can help us. And when you become a millionaire, you hire somebody to do all of these bad things that you don't want to do, right? But culture isn't necessarily the ideal teacher when it comes to our own philosophical and spiritual well-being. So, just question those things and question whether it's a result of culture or of genuine badness is how I'd say it. But
I find like that line between like wanting to do something and not wanting to do something, like never underestimate how small that can be, because I've just found like if you get some nice smelling dishwashing liquid, like that can be enough to get you to be like, hey, this is kind of, it's like that's what activates the habit, is like the reward, and the reward is, I just like a little bit of nice smelling. I've got this pomegranate one, and it's like it's so fickle. Like how that thing, I don't want to do this, it's so fickle, and it's so easy for it to just wither away from the smallest little thing, that it just shows how all these judgments you've got in your mind, they're just made up, they're not true.
Yeah, chuck some headphones in your ear, listen to some new music, hey, check out a great YouTube video or something like that, just you can always make something sweet if you're willing to add the right ingredients, and so yeah, just like whatever you're doing, just look at any ways that you can make it a little bit sweeter, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's showing up in a cheerful and grateful way.